I'm Autumn Lockett,
And this is Mitch Randall.
and you're listening to Good Faith Weekly.
Welcome to this episode of Good Faith Weekly. And on this week's episode, Autumn and I are going to catch up just a bit. And we're going to have an extended interview with Dr. Terrell Carter, Vice President of Community Life and Chief Diversity Officer at Greenville University in Greenville, Illinois. And Dr. Carter is also a theologian as well as a former police officer. So it is a fascinating interview that you will not want to miss. Autumn, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing well. I'm a little concerned about our COVID-19 numbers that are just, it's sort of like when you're on a roller coaster and that tick, 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 tick sound is happening. Yeah, That's what's happening.
I tell you what, it has been amazing to see how quickly this has escalated just within the last week or so. Here in Oklahoma, obviously, we have hit two highs in reporting confirmed cases. Yesterday, we had the highest confirmed case. I think it was almost 500 for a single day. And Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, all of these states seem to see an incredible increase in confirmed cases. Read just this morning in Houston, Texas, that they are really concerned in the next 24 hours that they're going to be running out of ICU beds for those who they're admitting for COVID-19.
Oh, you mean just like the epidemiologists said would happen back in April?
Exactly. And that's where we're going back to this idea, and there seems to be no reckoning at this point, at least. Maybe there will be in November, that all these politicians, regardless of party, who wanted to rush back and open up businesses and restaurants so quickly and tell people they didn't have to wear a mask and it was going to be fine and the summer months were going to kill the virus. Well, guess what? They forgot to tell everybody except the virus, because the virus did not care what they were doing. They created these petri dishes for people to enter into that was just prime for contracting the virus. It was just absolutely asinine. It was uncalled for. And now we're seeing the results of those decisions. I hope and pray that these people are held accountable for their lack of leadership in this perilous time.
Yeah. Mitch, how do you respond to the people, primarily evangelicals, who are saying things like, you're living in fear and God's going to protect me, and all the rhetoric that we're hearing around this anti-masking movement?
See, and that is such a childish way of approaching these issues from a theological standpoint, because fear is a natural reaction given to us by God. There's the fear and flight components of every individual. And so fear is a defense mechanism. It helps protect us. When you look at the Bible, there was certainly fear all throughout it. Now, the question is, how do you react to that fear? Fear is a gift given to us by our Creator. It is innate in every human being. You've heard of the fear and flight reactions of every human being. The reality is, fear is a gift from God. It helps protect life. It helps protects families. It's how we react out of that fear that is essential. I'll give you an example of this. You think about David, for example, when Goliath was sent out to fight the armies of Israel. And Goliath is out there and he's mocking the Israelites, and they are cowering in fear because you have this giant out there threatening to destroy them. And here you have young David come. And I'm sorry, David was probably a little bit scared. Mm-hmm. And what did he do to protect himself? He took a slingshot and some rocks. He used the tools available to him to protect him and his people. Mm-hmm. But it was a reaction out of fear because you had this giant coming in saying that he was going to kill everybody.
Right.
So let's take it in today's context. The COVID-19 scares the living hell out of all of us because it is killing us as a global society and infecting millions. We're almost to 250 million infections across the world. So the virus itself is this giant causing fear. Now, how we react to that fear is essential. And so we look around. What has God given us to protect us from this giant of a virus? Well, He's given us the best scientists that ever have walked on the earth. He's given us masks. He's given us the ability to understand social distancing is the best way to fight this giant and to kill it. And so how we react out of that fear is actions of responsibility and actions of courage, because that is the way to attack the giant. It is irresponsible to not use the tools that God has given us, the assets that God has given us to protect ourselves and to destroy the giant at the same time. So it is absolutely childish to say to David, go out and fight that giant, but hey, leave your slingshot, leave your rocks there on the sideline. Just you go out and take care of him fist to fist. That is, I'm sorry, stupid. To combat this virus by just ignoring it and going out and living your life as it's not even there is asinine, and it is childish and ridiculous. God has given us these incredible tools to combat this virus and to kill this giant. And people of faith, unfortunately, are leading the way and saying, no, we're going to ignore those tools you've given us, God. We're going to go on our own because we've got this misguided understanding of living in fear. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And as you can tell, get really frustrated about it.
Yeah. Well, and I just think about that felt board story of David and Goliath. You know, on the felt board, like you said, he used the tools at hand. He used a slingshot. He used a rock. He didn't stand there in the face of Goliath and stick his big David head in the sand.
Exactly.
You know, I would go, you know, you said they're going to come out fighting with their hands. These people aren't even fighting with their hands. They're just completely ignoring and choosing to just, you know, it's like, you know, there's something dangerous outside. So you just close your curtains and don't look at it.
Yeah. You know, it reminds me of why theology is so important and making certain that we study and understand the scriptures and how we apply those scriptures to our life. Because what we are seeing now is this misguided masculinity of a theological understanding that, you know, we're just so tough that we're going to go out and, you know, combat this giant without any tools that God has provided us. And that's just not the way this works. The way we have faith in God is to look around and see the tools that He has given us. And we've already named those tools. But it is disingenuous and what I have termed in the last few years theological malpractice, not to rely upon
blasphemous.
Yes. If you do not rely upon God and the gifts that God has given you to combat the evils and the diseases of this world, it just blows my mind. And I just really, really don't understand it.
Speaking of evil diseases,
racism.
Let's talk about racism.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll tell you what, instead of you and I talking about it again, let's listen to the interview that we conducted with Dr. Terrell Carter, which is absolutely incredible. So stay tuned after these messages.
And they're going to hear half of it on this episode.
Oh, that's right.
And
Yep.
we're going to do the other half next week.
Because it's that good.
It is that good. He had so much to say, we couldn't edit him.
Right. That's absolutely so. Stay tuned for the first half of our interview with Dr. Terrell Carter.
Are you worried that COVID-19 is going to put off your plans for theological education? The Baptist Seminary of Kentucky is offering a full schedule online this fall. Our approach to online education is unique, offering classes live and face-to-face via Zoom. At BSK, relationship is critical, and we are thrilled to be able to offer our Master of Divinity, Pastoral Care Certificate, and Rural Ministry Certificate this way. Learn more at bsk.edu.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. And on this episode, we have a very important guest with us, Dr. Terrell Carter, Vice President of Community Life and Chief Diversity Officer at Greenville University in Greenville, Illinois. Dr. Carter, welcome to the pod today.
Thank you for having me.
We are delighted that you're here.
Yeah, we are so thankful for you taking the time. We had sort of a candid conversation with you last week, and Mitch and I immediately decided that you needed to be on the podcast stat, which it sounds like you've been doing a lot of these kind of things. So we appreciate your time.
Again, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you all for the invitation.
Wonderful. So we want to start out just with a question we've been asking everyone during this pandemic. How are you and your family doing?
We are actually doing pretty well. I have my wife, and we have our 15-year-old daughter who lives at home with us, and we have a 22-year-old son who graduated from college last year, but who lives in Atlanta now. So he's doing well. Our 15-year-old daughter, I joked 2 Sundays ago when I serve as pastor of a church, and I joked at the beginning of the sermon that before all this happened, everybody wanted to work from home. My daughter was complaining about having to go to school, but now she told me and my wife, I am ready to start seeing other people. So
I'm with her.
Right. So we're all doing well. You know, my wife works from home. I still come to the campus every day. So it's just been really interesting, but very thankful that the Lord has blessed us and has protected us. And we both have continued to work as well.
That's fantastic. Great. Glad everybody's healthy and starting to get out and safely, obviously, but to get out from the quarantine that we were all facing for months and months. So, well, you know, again, glad that you decided to be with us today. You know, we had a conversation, as Otto mentioned a moment ago, last week, talking about some potential columns that you're going to be writing for Good Faith Media, also potential book projects that we're working with you on. And in the course of that conversation, we thought, we got to have Dr. Carter on because he was so wise in what he was saying and the issues that you were talking about last week. We wanted to invite our listeners to get your perspective on as well. Part of your job at the university is Chief Diversity Officer, which I absolutely love that title. We've talked a lot about diversity these days. We're really intrigued by the work you're doing at Greenville. So tell us a little bit about your work at the university as Vice President of Community Life and Chief Diversity Officer.
So I was hired at Greenville University, which is located in Greenville, Illinois, because literally they experienced a season where students of color, minority students, did not feel welcome. And probably the simplest way for me to say it is, after Mike Brown was shot and killed several years ago, we had minority students who began to take a knee during athletic events. And people within the community and the surrounding communities did not respond very well to that at all. At one point, football players at a homecoming game planned on taking a knee, and local veterans from the city of Greenville and the surrounding community took offense to that. And so they worked out a plan where these veterans would do a color guard presentation, present the flag, all those things, and then the students, the athletes, would come out and still take a knee. Unfortunately, not a biker gang, but a group of other veterans from other surrounding communities showed up on bikes and stormed the field to fight our student athletes.
Oh my goodness.
Right. And so in addition to that, there were several other things that occurred. But from that was essentially the final straw that leadership within the community, or leadership within the university, understood that race and race relations was a much bigger challenge than they fully understood, or that they were fully ready to try to engage themselves. And so that's where my position, or why and how my position, was created. And so I had previously been a assistant professor at Central Baptist Theological Seminary, which is in Shawnee, Kansas. I live in St. Louis. My family is in St. Louis. I serve as pastor of a church in the suburbs of St. Louis, and was looking, as much as I loved Central, I wanted to get back closer to home. And I have been writing, as you know, about race and reconciliation for several years.
Right.
And when I saw this advertisement, it seemed like a good fit, and the Lord blessed that I was eventually chosen as the Chief Diversity Officer. And I have to acknowledge, though, that it has been somewhat of a struggle since I have been here. I've been here a year, and, people talk about diversity and the need and desire for diversity, but when it comes to the actual work of doing diverse things or move it into a life of diversity, it is harder than many people think, or than what most people think. So
yeah, and that's a great point, Dr. Carter, because a lot of times we do talk about diversity. It's something that many of us attempt to achieve, but it's not easy because there's hard work attached to that kind of diversity.
And ongoing work.
It is
it's
absolutely.
not a box that you check.
Yeah. So what are some of the goals of the
right.
university that you're striving towards? What are some of the projects you're working on?
What we have done, so the student population, again, Greenville, the city of Greenville is historically a white, town with less than 10%, 15% diversity, and the majority of the diversity comes from the student body. And our students our diverse students are primarily athletes, so that brings its own challenges. But what we are trying to do is give students a bigger platform to be able to talk and to have their voices heard, and for them to be able to contribute to the decision-making process. We are also intentionally engaging with the community. We just formed a community reconciliation task force, which I'm leading, but we have within that task force city leaders, as well as leaders from the university, as well as student leaders who are all working together to form initially a mission statement that says, here goes what we have understood has been the challenge within our community and our relationships. Here goes what we plan on doing to try to fix those relationships, or to heal those relationships rather. And here goes the time frame. And that's just the beginning. So those are some of the initial things, making sure that students are more involved and they contribute to the decision-making process. And then also this reconciliation task force that brings leaders from each of the different sectors to just, be very open to come up with plans, come up with timeframes. And, it's not about words. It's always going to be about action. If we cannot come up with actionable items, then we're not going to even discuss it. We're going to move on to something where we can come up with actionable items.
Well, you're doing great work, and just keep it up, and hopefully continue with passion and with compassion, teaching these students and also transforming the community around it. The community needs to come to grips with their own past, also with the realization of we live in a diverse world, and the need to embrace that. So good job.
Yeah, absolutely. So in addition to this pandemic of racism that we're all dealing with and have been dealing with, there's another pandemic going on. The numbers are insane. Over 9 million cases around the world, with over 2.3 million in the U.S. And we're approaching 500,000 deaths globally, as the death rates in the U.S. Are nearing 125,000. We read a report recently by NPR that said, unsurprisingly, that the virus is affecting communities of color disproportionately. Race and ethnicity known for almost 50% of all reported cases and 90% of death in the U.S. So how do you respond to that news?
So, it's obviously not good news, but it also points out the disparities that are clearly present in our communities. COVID-19 is not racist. I'm sorry for laughing, but
no, you're absolutely right.
But it shows the disparities in how our different communities, the disparities that exist between our different communities. It's the first I live in St. Louis, and the first 12 or 14 deaths from COVID-19 were all African Americans. It points out the fact that there's a lack of multiple things in white culture and black culture. I'm going to simplify it because I am black, I'm African American, and obviously the two of you are white. It shows the disparities between those two groups. Again, I recognize there are more groups than just that. But, it shows in St. Louis, it shows the lack of accessible healthcare. It shows the lack of healthcare. It shows where the healthcare is being most concentrated and where it is not. It shows who has insurance and who does not have insurance. But it also shows who trusts the government, who trusts these systems and who do not. So I just said three things, and I want to be very quick in how I try to explain this. So again, I'm a former police officer in the city of St. Louis. I used to patrol, essentially the entire city, as most officers do at some point. But when you look on a map, I'm also on the board of directors for the St. Louis Mental Health Board, and we commissioned a study to show where the medical resources were found in the city of St. Louis versus where the greatest need is. And the medical resources are not located in the places that have the greatest need. The medical resources are located in the places that have the greatest amount of money and the greatest amount of resources in order to be able to access that. But the people that need it the most are the furthest away. It's just like when it comes to food deserts and those kind of things. The communities that are most hard hit by these kinds of things are the ones who have the least access to it. Number two, it shows who has insurance and who does not. Again, if you have a job and you have a job of a certain level or a certain income, then it's more than likely that you're going to have insurance. But again, the people that most need it or need access and need to have the opportunity to take advantage of these things, typically in St. Louis have the lower paying jobs and don't have the insurance that they need. Again, and number three, there is a distrust in the medical community, a distrust of the medical community in certain minority communities. Most people don't know this or understand this, but African Americans, Black people have distrusted or have not trusted, government or medicine because of the things that have happened in the past as well. So I'm not going to bring up a whole list, but there was a famous study that was done where African Americans were injected with syphilis and allowed to see what happened to their bodies and to their families after they were exposed to those kind of things. So there is a long-running distrust of the medical community as well in many African-American homes because of the things that we've seen or that we have experienced in the past. And so all of that, in my mind, plays into the disparities of who gets sick and who gets treated or who dies from coronavirus or COVID-19.
Dr. Carter, you're absolutely right, because, not only is this disproportionate with the African American community, but it's all people of color. We see it with the Hispanic community, the indigenous people. I'm Native American, so I'm from the Muskogee Creek tribe, and of course, Native Americans have this long history.
My apologies for not recognizing
that. People skip over it all the time. They just think I live in the South and I'm dark complected. So,
well, you nailed me, Terrell. Guilty.
But there is, but my point was with the Hispanic communities, with the African American communities, with the Native American communities, there's these long histories of distrust, not only with the government, but also with the white culture. And when pandemics like we're seeing and enduring right now emerge, all of a sudden it reveals all of these these historical fractures that have occurred over time, and it plays into the travesties of sickness and deaths because of this mistrust. And so when theologians like yourself and pastors around the country keep hammering to their congregation, this is the reason we need to love one another. This is the reason we need to respect one another. This is the reason we need to find common ground. It's because of situations like this. When these emerge, there's going to be all of these fractures that are revealed within a pandemic or within a global crisis. And so, I'm trying to echo your words because I do see it across ethnicities and cultures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not only are we enduring this global pandemic, but we're experiencing what many are hoping is a global transformation when it comes to the issue of social justice and specifically racial justice. With the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, and so many others, people have taken to the streets to protest and demand changes. One of those changes includes revisioning policing in this country. And as a former police officer, as you mentioned a moment ago, what do you think needs to happen to policing in this country?
So we need 2 episodes to talk about what I think needs to occur.
We can do that.
Clear the schedule, because I'm here for it.
Right. I'm sorry. I always apologize for this, but I've written 2 books about policing.
Mm-hmm.
One was called Walking the Blue Line, and the other is called, most recently, Police on the Pedestal. And Police on the Pedestal was written in 2018 and was released in 2019, February of 2019. And each of the books builds upon each other. The point that I'm getting to is that policing, what I have learned, is not about helping citizens. Policing is about protecting that system. So policing, in my mind, is a system. Like any relationship is a system, any organization is a system. Policing is a system itself, and it exists to take care of itself. And officers are not encouraged to go out and help people. At no point in my tenure as a police officer did anyone ever say to me, your job, your duty, your privilege today is go out and help people. I was always told your job is to go out and make arrests and to get people to stop calling 911 so you can concentrate on making drug arrests. So there just needs to, not just, but there needs to be a complete overhaul in the purpose of policing. And that takes multiple steps, from changing the laws to not asking police officers to be the end all for everything. A police officer should not be expected to be a social worker, should not be expected to be an arbiter between family disagreements, should not be the person that has to go and respond to a dog barking. We have city services or county services for those things, but we expect police officers to be the person that handles everything. And that comes with a unique level of stress. Those things just alone, trying to be the one that takes care of everything. But again, when you add that to the stress of a system that says you exist to help us get more money by making arrests, by helping us build statistics in order that we can apply for this grant so we can get this new equipment. That's a unique kind of pressure that changes how you view people. One of the things I say all the time is I am a pretty lucky guy. I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky guy. I don't get stressed over too many things. I'm able to keep a pretty even keel. But when I was a police officer, my whole disposition changed because I never saw people at their best. I never interacted with anyone while things were good. It was always under stress. So number one, help people. What needs to change in policing? The nature and the purpose of policing needs to be reevaluated and modified. Number two, we have to help police officers understand that not all people are criminals, that just because you live in a particular neighborhood or you look a particular way does not make you a criminal, that citizens are not just a means for you to build your statistics of arrest so you can get promoted. Police officers don't get rewarded because they were officer friendly, because they helped the family. Police officers get rewarded and promoted because they've made a certain level of arrest over, a series of years.
So there truly is a system. It's a reward system based upon, I don't want to use the word confrontational, but it's a reward system based upon, how many arrests. And so it's not incentivized to not make an arrest.
Right. Yeah, very true. I mean, I remember I used to work secondary. That's a part-time job in uniform, as a bank security officer. And I had a sergeant who used to berate me. Well, not berate, but he used to give me a hard time. And he would say to me every day, "Oh, you're going to work this part-time job. All you have to do is go out and arrest somebody, and you can make all the overtime you wanted." And my response to him was, "Why would I arrest somebody just for the sake of getting overtime? Mm-hmm. That doesn't make sense. That's ruining somebody else's life just for a few dollars in my pocket." But that's the type of attitude that I'm saying that needs to be changed.
Right. Yeah, I was watching. Go ahead.
Would you say that that's unique to the police department where you worked, or would you say that's a pretty universal sort of environment of police?
That is a pretty universal environment. One of the other things that I've begun to say on a regular basis is when you start hearing, one of the unique things about the complaints that African Americans have been making about police is you're not hearing anything new. These are all things that have been said for multiple generations, not multiple years, but multiple generations. So yeah, there's nothing new about the difference in all of this has been over the past, almost month, is that more of this stuff has been showing up on camera and people have been responding to what they've seen on camera. But this is not the first time it showed up on camera. I mean, right, sure. I don't know how old you are, either one of you are, but all you have to do is think back to Rodney King. And mm-hmm. before Rodney King, all you have to do is think back to Dr. Martin Luther King and, how they were treated by police. And then before that, all you have to do is go back to photos in newspapers and magazines. Yeah, Emmett Till. Yeah.
I mean, when his mother made the decision to have an open casket, it was to show just the atrocity and the violence and the evil that was happening in the South.
Yes, I agree completely. And so none of this is new. So to answer your question, Autumn, yes, this is, I would say, I hate to use the word rampant, but it is the order of business for any law enforcement agency that you come in contact with.
Yeah. Okay, and we're going to stop there for today, and we'll resume the rest of this interview next week.
Our audience, thank you for listening in, and as always, make certain you're practicing good faith.